Well, for more on the issue, we can now cross live to our guest, CPR Daily radio newscast host Don DeBar. Mr. DeBar, thank you for coming on the programme and speaking to us today. Now, if we can get straight into it, Fidel Castro was very cautious about the renewal of ties with the US, wasn't he? So now he's gone. What does this mean for relations between the two sides?
I guess that remains to be seen. We've had the moves made by the United States to normalize relations. That's how it's being framed here, although the embargo is still in place that the United States has tried to use for more than 50 years to strangle the Cuban economy. Fidel Castro, as a ruler, quote unquote, it's kind of not really representative of what happens. There are institutions that are more or less ground-up institutions with the committees for defense of the revolution and local, people's organizations and groupings that actually govern the country. Those are still in place, and there's going to be certainly some sort of adjustment of that to the increasing integration of Cuba into the regional and world economy, if that happens over the coming period. But I think that, your deputy director of RT Spanish is right that you'll see now that he's, gone. He'll become more of an iconic figure, among the popular culture. Maybe you'll see his face in public somewhere now, other than, the personal appearance, like you see with Che Guevara.
Now, Castro's death, along with Trump's new presidency, is quite an interesting combination. Do you think these two things together are going to change the future course?
It's interesting. Trump took an anti-rapprochement line with Cuba, clearly targeting Cuban exiles in Miami and Florida to win Florida. He took a contradictory position by also supporting essentially the groups that are exiles and revolutionaries from Haiti to win that group in Florida too. But the overarching foreign policy directive that he has announced, that he mentioned it to standing ovation at the Republican National Convention, is no more regime change. So if you hold him to the policy announcement that he made, perhaps relations with Cuba could be reset to something actually normal rather than the Monroe Doctrine version that the U.S. has always used towards the entire hemisphere.
Now, we've seen the rise of anti-establishment figures all around the globe recently. In the US, for example, Bernie Sanders, he inspired a lot of people with his socialist agenda. Do you think Castro is still a source of inspiration for the new generation of socialists?
Well, around the world, first of all, there's the legacy of Castro and the Cuban Revolution's work. The end of apartheid in South Africa, the independence of Angola, and any other country that has a modicum of independence in Africa. They basically owe that to the solidarity shown by Cuba and Libya, and the Soviet Union and China to a degree also. But certainly Cuba had troops on the ground. They were the ones that were killing South African soldiers trying to defend Angola from South Africa. They ultimately led to Mandela and the ANC taking power. Looking across the Western Hemisphere, you have, first of all, the solidarity Cuba showed to Venezuela that allowed the government of Hugo Chavez to survive the coup and to actually begin building socialism in the form of, say, 1 million apartment buildings and many other things that have been under attack constantly by the U.S. But you look at the recent victory of with like a 70-something% vote in Nicaragua of Daniel Ortega. That's also the legacy. The victory of Evo Morales, the situation that exists, the conditions that exist in Ecuador, the left-leaning governments that were able to spring up in Argentina and Brazil, and in fact go back to Chile in the early 70s. All of these were because of the example and the assistance and solidarity from Cuba with, certainly with the full push from Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro was, it seems, the last openly skeptic person of rapprochement between the US and Latin America. So what does this death mean for the whole future of the region?
Well, he's not the only skeptic. You're talking to one, but, his death, that remains to be seen. He still, very recently, around the time of his birthday, spoke publicly and offered counsel to people that are looking to build, self-determination in their own countries, sovereignty, build their economy so that they serve the people that live there instead of multinational corporations. He's not available to offer that individual advice at this point to people, but he left a very long record of such things. I mean, people still look to Marx and Lenin and DeBar and others for advice in the historical record. Fidel Castro left a quite extensive one, both in terms of words and examples. So, people will miss him around the world, but his contribution will continue.
For many, Castro was the symbol and perhaps always will be the symbol of opposition to U.S. dominance. So what does his death mean to those countries opposing the U.S.?
Well, it's going to mean whatever they make of it. The struggle with imperialism continues on the ground in every country that's its victim. And if people decide to resist or to continue to resist where they are resisting, then his death will basically mean that time passes, but the struggle continues. If that doesn't happen, the struggle still continues.
Now, Castro, he was such a key figure in history, an extraordinary man. Can you give us a sense of what not just Cuba has lost, but the whole world has lost?
Well, I'll point again to South Africa, for example. If it weren't for Cuba's assistance to Angola and to the ANC, South Africa might still be an apartheid country de jure, not just in terms of the economic sphere. And, countries like Zimbabwe and others that have some independence wouldn't have it. Now, certainly in Latin America, Ecuador, Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia, all of those places would have been in a much harder place than they are. So going forward, people that are looking to liberate themselves, and the opportunity seems to be presenting itself in multiple spheres around the world right now, they won't have the direct assistance of Fidel Castro, but again, they have his example and the record that he left, and many others, by the way, to look to. So his death may, break one's heart, but, we're all mortal, and he lived to be 90. I think the world is very fortunate that that happened. And consequently, having lived such a long life, he left a very long record of work that we can look to for example and, assistance.
Now, what do you expect to happen with Castro's legacy, or his brand, if we can call it that, in the future?
That's going to is going to depend on us. We're going to decide that. Those of us that are struggling for independence, sovereignty, dignity around the world, if we survive, we'll hold up his example. And if we don't survive, those who vilify people that try to promote those values will define it.
Don DeBar, CPR Daily Radio Newscast host, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.